Hey guys, this is Evan Bourcier, and you're watching vlog number 7, which is all about shooting handheld that doesn't suck. A lot of people come and ask me, how do you get your handheld footage to look the way that it does? And we've all been there, done that, including myself, that you try to shoot handheld, you go home, dump your footage after the shoot, and it's just a bunch of shaky garbage. And so I want to give you some tricks to how I avoid that. I'm not using my regular microphone today because I want to be able to move around a little bit. So trying to do this in the confines of the webcam, and we'll see how it works out. One of the most important things you can do is just have a stable position that you're shooting from. So I tend to my hand is kind of under the camera and my pointer finger and thumb are on the focus ring, and I'm just shooting like this, and this is a very stable position. I see some people do like different weird things, and like this is not a stable position because the camera's just moving all over. But if you're here and kind of bring your elbows in and tight, like this is a really solid place to be. And the first big key to handheld that doesn't look horrible is staying loose. If you try and like really tense up, be like, I'm going to hold this shot perfectly still, all your muscles are firing to hold themselves tight, and so you get all these little jitters in your footage. But if you just loosen up and you take a second and you just let yourself kind of float a little bit, if you watch good handheld, it's usually floating, and you get a little bit of this sway going on. Like this is something that I find myself doing a lot while I'm shooting handheld, is you have just this very light sway going on. And generally we're tracking the camera to kind of compensate for the sway, so you're getting a tiny little parallax move, but it might even be slower than this, but you're just letting your muscles stay loose, and you're not really like forcing the camera, you're just flowing with the camera. And if you have to get down low, you bring yourself down. If you have to stay up higher, you can do that too. But you're taking the time to really make sure that you're staying loose and not overly trying to force yourself into a tense position. So if you can stay loose and get a solid grip, that's really going to be the most important thing when it comes to a DSLR. Now, say you go up a little bit and grab something like a C100. I think there's two kind of ways that I'll tend to end up shooting handheld with a C100. One is very similar to the DSLR, so you've got your side handle and you're kind of cupping again, and you're just shooting like this and kind of holding all those notes from earlier of, staying in tight, staying loose, and just kind of, we're shooting over here, we're shooting over there. If you've ever shot with a glide camera, Steadicam, then you know that you kind of have to sink down a little and walk heel to toe, so your heels hitting first and you're kind of rolling through your foot going forward as you walk, so you aren't just like stomping through somewhere. You're really trying to isolate your hips and use that to allow you to walk smoothly. So that helps, so that if we're walking through a shot, we're really kind of ninja stepping to try and keep the camera in the same place. Our muscles are staying loose, our arms are loose, and so we're just supporting the camera as we're kind of going through somewhere. And you can kind of be intentional about, like some of the sports stuff that I shoot is really aggressive, and so we're intentionally kind of like whipping the camera around and adding a lot of movement to it. But if you want just like good, simple, clean handheld, that's really important. And so what you might have seen right there too is that a lot of the time I'll actually shoot with my hand just on the top handle here. And part of that is that you have gravity on your side then if the camera isn't wanting to wiggle, because it just wants to hang. And so if your camera's balanced okay, then this other hand is just supporting a little bit, so my right arm isn't taking all the weight, but we're allowing the camera to just kind of hang here, letting gravity do what it does best, and that's allowing us to get some pretty stable footage. So like say you have to shoot on something like a Dragon or an Alexa. Everything that I just said works with this, but the problem is that you're going to get super tired. It's just heavy. Like, it doesn't even have a follow focus or a battery on it right now. And it just weighs too much for me to shoot this way for any more than a few minutes. So you can do it, and I've definitely done it on jobs. And it can work out really well. Quickly throwing my follow focus on here. But it's just heavy, so you have to keep that in mind. But this is honestly the smoothest way. Like if I have to shoot really smooth walking shots or something, I'll usually shoot them like this, just living on the top handle, doing the smooth walk, and this is how we'll end up covering, because your body's able to isolate a lot of that movement. Now, if you have a long shoot day, or you're shooting an interview or something, or you're just not strong enough to walk around with a Dragon for a long time, that's where something like an Easyrig comes into play. So this is my Easyrig Mini Strong, which I have owned for a while now and absolutely love. And it has the addition of this Kong Frog carabiner on it, which is pretty cool. So I can open this up and just hit the little eye bolt I've put on my top handle, and I've captured my dragon. And so what the Easyrig does is it doesn't stabilize anything. Like, the camera's still just as free to be wobbly as it wants to. But what it does is it takes that weight off your arms. So I'm not sitting here holding it now, it's holding itself. So you adjust the tension on the back to match it to the camera, because if your tension's really high and you put like a light camera on it, it's going to want to suck up all the time because there's a spring in here. And if the camera's too loose, or the spring's too loose and your camera's too heavy, it's going to sink all the time. So you want it to where it's going to sit wherever you leave it. So if you're scientifically inclined, it's like being neutrally buoyant. So if I want to shoot low, I put the camera low and it stays there. If I want to shoot high, I put the camera high and it stays there. And then all I'm really doing is steering the camera a lot of the time. So I will often either be on the back of the camera here or like on the side of the camera like this, and then my other hand's on my follow focus, and I'm just kind of stabilizing the same way and staying loose and shooting the way we talked about before. If you're shooting something like an interview, that's where the sway gets really important, because if you try and lock down, your body's going to start to vibrate and you're just going to start putting a bunch of weird motion into your shot. So you definitely want to stay loose. Now, the downside to the Easyrig is that anytime that I move, the camera's moving too. So if I like am walking, this is where the like smooth hip walk becomes even more important, because otherwise the camera's going to start bouncing on you. And so I actually usually try, if we're shooting like walking stuff, to pop the camera off and go back to shooting the handheld way I was, because your arms are better shock absorbers than the Easyrig is. So this is great for like, oh, we have to shoot way up, you know, and I don't want to like be laying on the ground, but it's not the best, most stabilized way of doing things. You can add something like the Serene arm onto the top and it helps with that, but you definitely have to be conscious of like the bouncing that's going on. And especially if you're using a lighter camera that you can get away with hand holding, like the C100, I would generally recommend that over using something like an Easyrig. But yeah, so the Easyrig's pretty much the same thing otherwise. I try to keep the camera tight to me. I try to make sure that I'm pushing against the string a little bit, so we have kind of this push-pull going on, which keeps the camera where I want it. And then I can just kind of steer it, whether we're shooting down at someone who's working here, or we're shooting up at someone. It gives me a lot of flexibility to kind of get whatever shot I need to, and even though I'm working with a pretty heavy rig, it still works out really well. But again, that like learning how to walk smoothly, it looks goofy, but it really helps a lot when you're trying to get stable footage. So those are kind of my big things. Stay loose, practice swaying a little bit. If you're using a really big camera, try out an Easyrig, but I wouldn't recommend an Easyrig for small cameras. Those are a lot of the tricks that I use to kind of help my handheld footage be good. But if you try to lock up, you try to just like float out there too far, you're going to start jittering a lot, and so you just have to keep breathing. It's really like, it's a weird psychological and mental thing to kind of get yourself into this state where you can just be kind of floating and not burning all your muscles. Because especially if you're shooting, like I've shot 90-minute interviews on an Easyrig with a Dragon on it, if you're really like activating your muscles that whole time, you're just going to end up like sweating and crying and exhausted and cramped up. So you really have to be intentional about staying loose and just practice. Like that's the other really big thing, is you go out and just shoot that way and see what works and see what doesn't work. That's going to make a big difference. So I'd love to hear more about any questions that you guys have about shooting handheld or the way that I work. Thank you so much for watching this vlog. Thank you so much to our sponsors, 64 Audio and Ear Trumpet Labs, who make an awesome microphone that I'm not currently using because I had to walk around the room. But thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, share this video if it was helpful, and check out my social media, which you can find in the link below. Thank you so much. Bye.